Bene, le luci annunciano l'inizio del nostro panel.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to start. Hopefully you had productive meetings this afternoon. So welcome back to those of you who are regularly attending the Mix event. We thought for this year as well, it would make sense to tell you what's going on around us, and more specifically the world of payment. And I don't know whether you've been updated about what's going to happen, but some news are coming next year and in the next year to come. So World of Payment are going to welcome many different pieces of news. So we'll speak through digital payment, money traveling around thanks to networks. So from left-hand side, Stefano Andreani, CEO of OpenTech. We'll tell you more about OpenTech in a moment. Valentino Bravi, CEO of TAS Group. Of course, we'll introduce TAS as well. We're hearing from Intesa Sanpaolo, Savino D'Amico. He is head of Digital Payment Innovation Center, and he deals with digital payment, as I said, but not only. Carlo Maiocchi, he's Director, Corporate Department of SIA. Joy Marino, well, you all know him. He's President of Mix. And here next to me, Francesco Ricci. He is CEO of Banknotes.
Joy, perché in un contesto dove normalmente si parla di reti, di telecomunicazioni,
we usually speak through telco and networks here. Why are we now tackling payments? So is there a reason for it? Well, there's always a reason for it, of course. And this year in particular, we really wanted to broaden up our mind, our context, and things are changing. Networks are now spread, disseminated all over, and many new different things are happening. We're getting increasingly open to welcome new technologies, and this is the world of bank is specifically hit and influenced here, as well as the world of technology, which is going as fast, and it raises expectations, of course. So we're now getting used of accessing things the minute we need it, so potentially the same will apply. The same will apply, although it does refer to our wallet, to our money. Well, that will happen also to world of payment. So when we made this choice, I was kind of shaking because it looks like we're out of context here, but actually feedbacks I've received have been all positive, and I was not expecting any such positive feedback. So we were all encouraged to move forward, to carry on that, and to go even beyond and to look kind of outside and think outside the box as well. So we'll see what will be feedbacks at the end of the afternoon, because they will be as important. You might have noticed that there's another piece of news here. So panel is only taking part second portion of the afternoon, so we've innovated as well. So if we ask questions relative to technology innovation, and if I ask questions around what are the top 3 things happening right now in the world of innovation and technology, well, for sure, digital payment is amongst the top 3. Many things have already happened, many will happen soon, and I would like to start with Savino D'Amico. He is sitting there, right in the
Innovation
center.
Center di Intesa San Paolo.
And
Qui ci sono delle
so we're
aziende
starting from
piccole
Innovation
giovani e
Center
delle
in Intesa
aziende
San
invece che hanno una
Paolo.
lunga
So
storia.
we're actually
Per esempio
welcome
Intesa
here
San
in state
Paolo.
today, young
Allora, perché
companies
esiste
and not so
l'Innovation
young
Center?
anymore. So
Siete in
why
100
is Intesa San
all'interno
Paolo
dell'Innovation
taking care
Center.
of Innovation Center,
Per
100
quale
people
motivo
working there?
e che cosa
And
sta
so why is
succedendo
that
in
and
linea
what is it
estremamente
really
generale? Poi
happening?
entriamo in
Just in a
alcuni
nutshell, of
particolari,
course,
in
and we'll delve
alcuni
into
trend in
details
modo
later on, and
particolare.
I will
Cosa sta
gather
succedendo nel mondo
trends
dei
more specifically.
pagamenti?
But
Giro
what is it
pagamenti è
happening
poco, perché poi
in
in
the
realtà
scenario within the landscape of
bisognerebbe aggiungere
payment?
qualche elemento
Now,
per poterlo
perhaps
fare.
I should be more detailed about it, and we'll do that in a moment. Well, we started 2014. CEO Carlo Messina decided back then to cluster in one center, in each center, all of those who dealt with innovation. And I'm not saying that there was no innovation being tackled before then, but innovation centers to that moment, they were being part of each and every department on a standalone basis. So a very strategic choice was made to make to make available both to Italy as well as to all the countries one unique innovation center that would cope with a number of activities and initiatives, identifying the best startups on the market, best solutions out there, and offering the best solutions to unmet needs and listening to business units' demands. It does happen that we have to gather questions and unmet needs and reply accordingly. So anything that is being raised by our business units around. What is happening and what is going to happen in the future? Well, payment, digital payments more specifically, has now been referred to as a commodity, similarly to utilities and methane and gas, natural gas. So I should also say that overall, payments have become pretty easy to execute, and sometimes when the customer is not paying, so that is free charge, that the perception is even different. Well, of course, later on in the afternoon, I'll be more detailed on that. But let's say that to speed up payment downstream, so for retailers and consumers, but that applies to companies as well. We have to we shall really make big efforts in terms of user experience. And what I mean here is that as banks, well, in Intesa San Paolo, but I'm pretty sure that all the banks, wholesale banks, are having the same objectives. So the overall aim is to simplify payment and to make it seamless and frictionless, as people ought to say now, so to approach such experience in payment to other technologies. It has become kind of natural for consumer now approaching a banking app, online banking. They want to take advantage of a high-quality experience, similarly to the kind of experience that he is gaining when he is on other apps such as Facebook, to mention one. So our objective is to simplify our customers' lives. We shall combine and match two different things with one another. So on the one side, user experience has to be simple, intuitive, straightforward. On the other side, we want to ensure security, 100% security, and that is not to be taken for granted. These are the two topics, and then we'll talk through blockchain later on. But those are the two things, the two hot topics we want to mention, first of all. So they're going to speak through blockchain. Perhaps some people are wondering about it. Yes, we will. Yes, we will, of course. We couldn't run away from it. So Intesa San Paolo, I did not introduce it too much. We all know what we're talking about, but of course it might be that we should spend a few words around open tech. Stefano Andreani, he is CEO as well as founder and managing director of Open Tech, handling digital payments in Italy, but not only. So would you like to introduce the company first? Thank you. Open Tech actually deals with mobile payments and is a service provider. And PCI DSS is perhaps what should tell you it perhaps is telling you something that rings a bell because it's now being used by merchants. So we are certified providers level 1. We've been certified by the regulation same that is applicable to MasterCard, Visa, credit cards, which is ensuring level of security when it comes to payment that is sufficient enough to manage data relative to credit cards and more generally payment instruments to the benefit, of course, of cardholder. OpenTech operates on a full stack end-to-end provider and provides both the user interface as well as the service. And it is indeed a fintech which believes that for us to innovate the market, it is crucial not to do small steps within a complex organization, but to actually make a bolder one and streamline services and processes. So that is in a nutshell what we do. We're currently working both Italy, Switzerland and Austria. The company, of course, has been established in Italy. So in your view, what did happen? What was happening in recent years, and what do you actually expect to happen from a digital transformation viewpoint, technology, innovation, and of course digital payments? What is the status quo, what we're headed to? So you mentioned blockchain earlier. I'm not such an expert in blockchain, so I won't mention it.
Ritengo che ci sia un tema più in questo momento più importante.
As I believe there is a more interesting topic that I would like to speak through when it comes to the landscape of payments in Europe. Potentially it will echo throughout the world, and I would like to mention directive PSD2.
Quindi PSD2, una normativa che
it is a norm, it is a directive which will be enforced formally starting from January next year. But we will probably gather feedbacks and results within the 18 following months. And it will generate repercussions over those months, so within 1.5 years, I would say, starting from January next year. So it is a directive which is often being called as open banking, and open banking is indeed the English definition for PSD2. That means the opportunity, possibility from third parties, so non-bankers, non-banking operators, to access transaction-related data as well as to instruments, payment instruments. It will mainly generate two different entities. Well, now I'm trying to simplify here. So there will be account aggregators on the one side, gathering, collecting data from many different banks relative to one user. Of course, one content is there, and the the way payment initiator, so being capable of initiate a payment, although we're not a bank. Okay, of course we will go back on that. Perhaps D'Amico wanted to add something on blockchain. Well, maybe I can provide some additional information relative to PSD2. Well, I guess everybody will want to have a say about it. Okay, no problem. Well,
tavolo.
I would like to throw a couple of topics out there
Da un lato
and gather your comments. So on the one side, we're observing transformation which is favored by technology, so incorporation of fintechs throughout the world. There are thousands around, and they handle with lots of things, payments included. That is even made easier by smartphones. Smartphones are increasingly quicker, faster, more connected. Networks are always increasingly more reliable. And then the landscape of traditional companies, which is now trying to understand how to react to this new wave of fintechs. And then blockchain, cryptocurrency, and then the regulation, of course, the regulatory framework, which is very stringent in this landscape. And for instance, PSD2, it is the acronym that you most likely be hearing about very often.
È estremamente importante.
And that is going to play a very big role, very important role.
Veniamo da questa parte del palco
And here,
con
on this side
Ricci
of
di
the
Banknotes.
stage,
Volevo capire intanto che cosa fate voi.
Ricci Banknotes, again, would like to ask you to introduce yourself, a company first, and what is it happening within fintechs? So many different inputs on how to transform payments. Francesco Ricci, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am founder of Banknotes. We are an innovative startup. A few years ago, we conceived this idea that was kind of randomly being conceived. And we meant to find the easiest way of making cash payment through the e-technologies. My background is a different one, actually. I used to work in telco, so I am not a bank. I'm not from the banking scenario where everybody else here is, actually. So we developed a different approach. We meant to be able to make a payment by making use of technologies. Starting from that idea, we went then investigating and probing and see what were technologies, infrastructures, SEPA, SWIFT, and all of the other standards that were existing. And we came up with SEPA being potentially the driver that we could start from, the one that we wanted to build upon. SEPA is not company, it's a European system of payment, by the way. Well, it's not actually European only, because there are 34 countries, Eurozone, European countries, and more.
Quindi giustamente sono più di 34 paesi quelli che
yeah, that is very accurate what you said. So it's 34 countries adhering. So why we were so attracted? Well, we were attracted by single payments, the possibility of making single payments through technologies. So what banks typically do, they do provide end-of-day reporting, and then based on positive and negative balances, they know how to perform, they know how to handle cutoffs, daily cutoffs. Avoiding daily cutoffs, but making payment line by line, our bottom line was, what if we set it up real time for the user who wants to make a payment? The bank will then pass on the payment to CH, and CH will give it to the beneficiary bank. This was going to happen real time. It means that we've been able to make a cash payment in an instant cash payment. We patented it, we deposited the payment, and we can actually make use of that. And we had spoken to companies back then. We're now about to sign an agreement with Altran, and we are currently observing and understanding how can we develop and build on that. And as opposed to being Betamax, we want to be the VHS of the future. Well, this is what I hope for.
Perché ritenete che ci
So
sia
why do
spazio
you
per
believe there's still room for
per
innovation?
voi? Molti di voi avranno sentito nominare Satispay, che è un'applicazione che viene utilizzata.
Similar
Cioè, mi
to
spiego,
Satispay,
allora,
perhaps you
spazio
have
c'è
heard
sicuramente
about it.
in
Well, I'm
questo
sure
momento,
there is
ma
room
nel momento in cui le
for
banche
that.
cominciano in modo massiccio, visto che hanno
But
i clienti, a
the
offrire
minute
soluzioni del
bank
genere che
will start
sì, è vero,
delivering,
una volta
offering
è
these
coperto da brevetti, però
solutions, and
immagino
they have a
che
massive
quanto
amount of
inteso anche
customers.
poi le altre
I
aziende
understand
con cui
your
faccio,
banknote is
siano
now
pronte per
being
soluzioni
protected by patent,
simil
and many
bank
more
note.
are now
il discorso
delivering
nostro è
similar
questo.
solutions, similar to
Un
banknotes.
nome,
So how do
Satispay, o ce
you
ne sono
expect to
tanti
survive?
altri, tutti hanno
Well,
ragionato con il
Satispay and
circuito.
others,
Io mi
they've
metto nel
all
mezzo, faccio
adopted
scrivere da
the
una
circuit-based
parte chi paga, dall'altra
system.
parte chi riceve, e poi
So
faccio il
those who
router nel
pay,
mezzo, e quindi
who's
sposto le monete da
receiving,
una parte
and then
all'altra.
I'm just
Noi non
moving
abbiamo
currency
pensato
from a
questo,
side
noi
to
non
the other.
abbiamo
Well, we
pensato al
haven't really
circuito,
considered
abbiamo
that.
pensato
We
alle
haven't
reti.
taken the
Cioè, in
circuit into
poche parole,
account, but
quello
more
che facciamo noi,
networks.
la banca dell'originator, di colui che
So
paga, la
the
banca di colui che
originator's
riceve,
bank
alla fine
and
è
the
come se avessero
recipient
fatto un
bank,
filo,
it
e
is
quindi
like they
diventa un
had a
peer-to-peer.
connecting thread.
E
So
quindi è
we
diverso.
made it become
Sì.
a
È più
peer-to-peer.
semplice.
So it is
Valentino
different
Bravi,
and much simpler as well.
TAS, voi siete una
Valentino
società
Bravi
che fa
from
software,
TAS
una
Group
società
CEO.
non
You
una
developing
startup, che fa
software.
software
You're
in
not a
questo per il
startup company, so
sistema
you're software
finanziario, sistema
developers
bancario da
for
molto tempo.
financial and
Chi
banking system
rischia di più,
for many
chi
years now.
vince, cioè c'è
So
spazio
who's
effettivamente
now
per nuove
running the
soluzioni che
biggest
arrivano da
risks and
startup o
who's going to
dal suo
make it,
modo
is
di
going to be more
vedere il
successful?
sistema finanziario in
And
poco tempo si
do you
trasformerà
expect
al punto che
financial
vedremo noi le innovazioni, ma saranno
landscape
sempre
to
i soliti player
transform,
a gestire il
perhaps
gioco.
to some extent, but we will still observe the same players over there? Well, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we call ourselves a startup company aged 35 because actually we've been tackling world of payment for the past 35 years. And over these 35 years, we've tried to deliver innovation. Well, it seemed to be ancient history. We did start with the bancomat, with the ATM card, up to today. We're now developing on behalf of our customers and partners PSD2 and instant payment, which is, of course, a key topic for the future. Around PSD2, yeah, true, that is going to be the battlefield where the match is going to be played by more traditional players, banks, and the new players on the other side, who are PIS, PIS, and CISP, peer-party provider. Starting from 2018, we will see them fully working, perhaps end of next year, beginning of 2019. They will be able to actually enter new business, which is the payment one. Other players are now looking into it as well, over the top, the GAFA, to give a name. Well, they've been very determined from day one to enter the landscape of payment. So, of course, PSD2 is potentially removing intermediation from banks, and we'll see who's going to make the most of it. Banks, on the other side, they're probably going to have an easier job. Although, yes, they have considered payment as commodity for many years, and over the tops as well will be there, and this is my own personal opinion, they will consider the business not so much to make it a profitable business, but to kind of make a comprehensive view and profile around their users, around the customers, and that is actually the very big value that they might be potentially deliver. I'm sure banks will react in the best way. They will define rules within PSD2. Rules will be the same for existing players, for new players, and also for the new fintechs which are being incorporated now. Within the competitive arena, consumers will make the most of it, but also everybody else. Who's now experiencing the biggest risk? Well, we do believe PSD2 is a huge opportunity. We have recently developed a new platform for players, and we're happy to see the market broadening up and getting larger and larger, well, those banks will not innovate and will consider that more as a risk rather than an opportunity, then won't be very successful.
Maiocchi di SIA.
SIA.
Per chi non la conosce, è un'altra azienda che
It is another company that deals with software and services. Just to give you an idea, last week they started in Europe, i.e. instant payments, and in some seconds money goes from one bank to the other in the European platform used by IBA Clearing, which is the company that manages this system, was made by SIA. Am I right? Perfect. This is one of the latest things you've done, but you've done many others. Yes, I don't know if you know it. For the experts, it's well known. We were established 40 years ago. So this year is the 40th anniversary, and we deal with payment systems. If you don't know it, it's much better for you, because the first paradigm of the security is the fact that it's not well known. 60% of interbanking transactions made in Italy, i.e. credit transfer from banks or withdrawals, pass through SIA. And about 60–70% of bancomat pins and credit card pins are in our archives. They are very encrypted, very secured and disaster recovered. But all of this is based upon a company that, in terms of payment systems, has become an excellent case. I'm proud of that, because today these instant payments take less than 1 second. So if you send money from a bank to a banking counterparty abroad in Europe, in the SIPA area, everything is done in a second with Italian technology. Allow me to, use this commercial. So it's innovation. Our company is not new, but it innovates every day. Today you can pay your bills, the tobacconist, thanks to SIA, and you can pay the supermarket, you can top up your credit card, your telephone card with SIA. Having said that, forget about it, so that it remains secure. What's your take on the future of a company this type in a world where also, thanks to the rules and technology, we have Ricci, who goes to the market with a solution which I believe is equally secure, and so on and so forth. Well, today, as compared to the past, 3 things have changed in the main. One was mentioned by my colleague Savino. Today, the payment system has become something very democratic. It's no longer in the hands of a happy few. Today, this is developed by the banking market and supervised or regulated entities, but, the way it is done is decided by consumers, and this is nice. So, if today I told a millennial, you have to pay an MAV, doesn't know what it means. If I told him, pay this installment, or, use a QR code via WhatsApp to pay the petrol, he would know immediately how to do that. And this is very important. The second thing, which is equally important, is that the new payment system is a world of rules. And we need these rules. It's important because we have to protect transparency and most especially security vis-à-vis the final consumer, customer. So this framework of rules, even though cumbersome at times, is the best guarantee that something nasty may not occur.
And interestingly, with PSD2, we have a new regulatory layer, but it makes it possible for all to be on an equal footing vis-à-vis the consumer, at least on paper. So there is a level playing field for companies and players that have created the history of payments like banks, and the new generation companies that want to introduce new user experiences like PayPal, which is the typical example of a newcomer or new entry since 2005, 6 and 7 onwards, including Sofart, which in Germany has been able to be successful, like Satispay, which in Italy, is very famous every day. But the third important element is that now, much more than before, security matters. It's no longer something guaranteed by interbanking regulations or supervisory bodies or the Bank of Italy, but it is cybersecurity. Today, we have layers of algorithms to encrypt sensitive data at all of the European processors today, most especially in the telco companies and in the corporate market in general, because the companies have started to make digital payments, which have become one of the most important paradigms vis-à-vis final customers. So, in this case, you have to take the IBAN and propose yourself one-click and user-friendly technologies so as to attract consumers' daily life, so that they will no longer use the traditional methods. But all of this requires cybersecurity. I mean, for example, the IBAN of a card is held by a biller, but now we only use tokens, with few digits helping you to track the number of a current account or credit card. So these are the three main highlights. So consumers and their user experience with the main payment, and who confirms or guarantees the success or failure of the payment system, and then interbanking regulators which are trying to introduce, these disruptive changes to stimulate competition, and we all believe this will be the case. So PSD2 is a case in point, just like instant payments. If you make a payment in 1 second, that's very important. I mean, there are macroeconomic theories based on the fact that the faster money circulates, the higher GDP will grow, in theory. I mean, this has not been confirmed, but if today you have to make 365 payments, i.e. in 1 a day, you will take 365 days. Today, in 1 hour, you can make them all. This makes you understand how you can very much speed up all of this thanks to the payments highway. And thirdly, I mean, it's not a given. Security. I mean, all that is simple, as a matter of fact, doesn't equal the amount of investments, and it is not directly proportional. I don't know whether to ask sia Tasso or D'Amico. However, one comment on the opportunities that we have in this industry for the companies setting their foothold in the market, be they startups or of the tops,
stavo per dire rompere le scatole, ma in realtà
which,
le uova, insomma, comunque
maybe disruptive in a way,
anche, sì,
and annoy, because of the tops, wherever they go, they can annoy someone.
Però faccia D'Amico la domanda, poi se volete.
So D'Amico first, and then you can step in with your comments. So these opportunities, are they there because the banks are slow to change? Just like, if you will, and if you want to focus on public transportation, I mean, if taxi drivers were sufficiently smart and organized, Uber would not exist, because, I mean, they're so far-flung that no one would call Uber. But since there is reluctance to change and lack of understanding of how to exploit technological innovation,
cito Uber,
That is why we have Uber and many other similar cases.
Nelle banche?
What about banks?
Dunque, intanto ne approfitto
First
per
thing first,
magari fare qualche osservazione
I'd like to make some comments
su quanto dicevano i colleghi, su
on
cui
what my colleagues said in general, and by the way, I agree with them. But for Intesa San Paolo, and I believe for most of high-standing banks, PSD2, like PSD1, is viewed very positively. Because prior to PSD1, there used to be companies which made payments without, however, having a legal reason for existing. Now we have the category of payment institutions, and now they can operate within that regulatory framework. The case of PSD2, but the fact was driven by a number of factors, including Salotto. It used to be and still is the company that makes it possible for Savino D'Amico, who has an account with Intesa San Paolo, to ask a third party to see the transactions or carry out transactions through that third party on the current account held with Intesa San Paolo. So, if you will, it is an indirect method. Yes, typically Salotto operates most especially to pay via e-commerce websites. That's correct, but that's the model. This is what my bank is trying to do. It's a service that does exactly this. And so far say, well, we've been here for longer than you. Anyway, let's not dig into this debate. Okay. Let us say that for us it is absolutely nice to have a discipline and regulation, precise regulation, and then, other than that, it has been correctly said that there is some sort of clash between incumbents on the one hand, i.e. banks, and new players on the other hand. But in point of fact, over the last 20 years I've gone through European directives and regulations on payments, and I've always been passive, i.e. I'm talking about PSD1 directives or the 2011 regulation, according to which the fees for domestic and foreign transactions were the same. So, I mean, they were all sanctions for banks. And then instead, in this case, like in the case of Intesa San Paolo, we are on the same level of tech giants. At last, we've been given the opportunity to compete vis-à-vis tech giants and the other banks, because the third-party role is not just for payment institutions, it's for Deutsche Bank and UniCredit and for us as well. So we want to actively play this type of role. And the other fundamental point is that in principle there is room for newcomers, but you know the time delay is fairly long when it comes to implementing in real life the PSD2, because in order to develop the PSD2 model, what we need is a body of regulation to standardize things, and we have it in the directive. The problems that they haven't had time to put it onto the ground, so to speak. So at least 1.5 years, because it takes 18 months. Okay, may I ask a question? Starting from D'Amico, and then the others can follow suit. Can you make some examples of what can happen thanks to PSD2? Because if we talk about payments already today, Ricci with banknotes could already be able to make payments from smartphone to smartphone, as is the case between the startups in Italy, including Satispay. I mean, I'm using this company because it is well known.
Possiamo fare degli esempi di
quello che potrebbe succedere? What can happen?
Cosa potrebbe succedere sia dal punto di vista
what can happen in practical terms and in terms of models?
Allora, dal punto di vista pratico quello che succede
in practical terms, what will happen is that I, account holders with Intesa San Paolo, ask a third party to operate with Intesa San Paolo. This could have a very strong impact in terms of relationships, i.e. the customer relationship within Intesa San Paolo would be diminished. So I think that this is one of the most sensitive issues, and that is why we at Intesa San Paolo and the banking system as a whole should try and become proactive so that we can reach out to a prospect from another bank rather than losing ours. But a telco that has a relationship with customers could, no, it should become a payment institution. Oh, that's not rocket science. No, absolutely. By all means, it's doable. He mentioned Amazon. Well, Amazon and Facebook have already applied for all of the licenses. Let's start from the Netherlands. It's the simplest country where you can apply for a license. The other thing that you can do is become, and well, in that case you have to obtain consensus and agreements from customers because it's a matter of privacy. And since the European Commission is very good, very good actually, at studying the areas they work in, and by the way, this type of approach for payments had already adopted years before by telcos, and they know the fact of segregating the network from data carriers. I mean, maybe they don't know, but amongst other things, as part of payments, they had tried to do what happened with the change of telco. They asked the banking system to make it possible to change your bank just like you change the telco, so with the portability of the current account. Thankfully, it has been possible because the current account numbers were structurally different and the IBANs of the different states are different. So this was a hurdle, didn't make it possible. Then we have had to work on the transferability of mortgage loans. We've had to, take account of transferability, not to lose customers. So what can you do? Once you've obtained the concept of your customers, you can propose to them new services. For example, if I put together in my app the accounts that my customer has with Deutsche Bank and UniCredit, I can show a balance, two balances, and assets and liabilities, so a PFM system, but a bespoke one. And I could also use the data coming from salary payments to make lending transactions easier, or I could offer loans because based upon all of the transactions carried out, I realize that there are, special events like childbirth or marriage or a journey, so I can offer a special bespoke, so I can have access to more information and have intelligence. Yes, I absolutely agree. Well, the sky's the limit. You would have a completely new world. I absolutely agree with them, by all means. But it would be worthwhile to dig into this world, and for sure it's going to grow exponentially in terms of number of payments, and the IoT world, i.e. all of the machines that can issue an order today and can trigger a payment tomorrow. We are studying a platform, for example, like another US entity did for the connected cards. So the fact of triggering a payment is very important because it could be directly automatic. Does PSD2 apply to toll payments and highways as well? Yes, of course, it applies to all. When you ask me something about risk, well, schemes, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they have a big issue. They're working, they're they're big, they're very good, but I'll make an example, the app. If any merchant that is an owner of the customer, because under PSD2, data belongs to the bank as well as to the data owner, i.e. the user. If a merchant today wants to develop using the tools enabled by PSD2 and with tools like instant payment, today they could carry out real-life, real-time payments in 11 seconds without using the schemes, where today they pay high merchant fees, 2, 3, 3.5%, so their saving is quite high.
Sì, interessante. Andreani.
That was very interesting. Andreani, what is your view on banks? Are they smart enough to take advantage of all that? So, D'Amico from Intesa San Paolo said that perhaps the largest tend to be smartest as well, but I would like to remind you that there are 600 banks in Italy. I don't know how many of you know about it, although few actually failed bankruptcy. Some of them have been saved, by the way. There's still 600 out there. What are they there for? Well, we probably just need 10, 12, but that's my personal opinion. Well, Enrico, you compared taxi drivers and Uber drivers and the banks. So if taxi drivers were smarter, Uber would not exist. Well, I'm not so sure. Maybe if that market was more open and more flexible, ready to compete, well, maybe there wouldn't be any need for Uber. That is my statement. That is the interpretation I would have. On a parallel, I would then shift it to the banking industry. Yes, true. PSD2 will open the market, will likely open the market. That market is not really free and open as yet, and there will still be some stringent regulations out there. So potentially it will be increasingly open to competition as well. What I'm saying is that open banks, smart banks, if you will, and those that will be more, let's say, prepared to cope with competition, well, those ones will have an easier life within this landscape. The outstanding issue is that the other ones will not just lag behind, but they will actually potentially threat the evolution of the system. And that is the real risk that we are undertaking with PSD2. Whilst larger banks, or medium-sized as well, medium-sized banks, or large-sized, those that are, let's say, accounting for a big chunk of the customer base overall, if they want to, they don't implement it, if they don't interpret correctly, so if they don't do that, the likelihood for failure out there is very strong. So there will be an opportunity which is not going to be seized. What is your own view around banks, though? Well, we do have a very multifaceted landscape, I guess, and it's very well diversified. And within SEPA, for instance, we do also operate in Austria. Or maybe because country is smaller, or for historical reasons, well, I don't know. But what we're currently observing when it comes to welcoming PSD2, welcoming, it means interpretation from banks. banks we speak to. Well, what we're observing again in Austria is that there is a better coordination and they're behaving in a more homogeneous manner compared to Italy. And that is perhaps a risk that my colleagues are more informed and knowledgeable about. Maybe they can be clearer on the explanation. Ricci, what is your business model?
Adesso cerchiamo di spiegarlo. Ci tengo a dire una cosa riferita a banknotes dove si va a collocare.
Let me tell you first, where do we position ourselves? So we're not a scheme. We do depend upon banks, and what we do develop a software system app which is interacting with the banking home banking system from a bank. So we're not an alternative to banks. We are bank-centric, actually. Our application software is totally bank dependent. So that is the answer to the indirect question, what kind of value do we deliver? Well, we believe we can deliver value just by ensuring that such system can be efficiently adopted and delivering as efficient a user experience. If it works for my in-law, it will work for everyone. So it has to be a piece of paper, just like a coin that goes from an end to another. So if you're able to do that, and if we can identify those instances where instant payment can be crucial, low payment. I was attending the Salone of Payments from ABI last week, and I was very much compelled, attracted by a panel where they would talk through the payment with, let's say, the petrol providers, petrol sellers, and so on. That was a very interesting session. If you go with the credit card or an ATM and you actually able to, let's say, gain 1% out of that 3% of revenues that they gather, well, that is a lots of money already. So, in a nutshell, I think there's still room for us, and in those instances, bank will have to take responsibility of that. Those are the instances where they have to step in. There's not just petrol, actually. There are more examples that I can mention. How about Altran? Well, Altran, we have a different background, which is not a banking background. We're not native. Altran, they have skills, history, abilities, capacities to go and speak to counterparties, which will be banks, namely, who will at least speak to people who have been experiencing the industry for many years. Can that be used via smartphone? Yeah, it's an application. It can be loaded on any device. Of course, there has to be some capacity there, but that's it. It's bi-directional, so it may receive money, it can pay money as well. Will you create a so-called acceptance network? Well, what we're doing is that going to the bank, tell them what they can have available and what is our business model so that they understand what kind of value they can generate and share the whole thing together. But how about POS already existing? Are they sufficient, or will you have to create an additional network? Well, any device will be okay, will be fine. It can be a POS, and then you can implement it on a POS. If it's a tablet or a smartphone, whatever the device. But the network has to be created, right? The acceptance, which is not banal. Oh, yes, for sure. That's very true. Maiocchi, you can perhaps answer that you've developed Jiffy. Jiffy? Yes, Jiffy is an interbanking initiative where we develop the technology is being offered by banks to the market. Yes, we develop technologies similarly as we did for Pago Bancomat. But actually, let me seize an opportunity here. Now, perhaps I will come across many different strong debates. So I'm a banker, I've been in the bank industry for many years, and I'm very proud of it. I was experiencing the golden era of payments developed here in Italy, and we do have a number of assets and skills which are very much appreciated by all European countries, and mandates, for instance, when it comes to paying utility bills and so on. Well, actually, we've been able to reduce the rate, the amount of outstanding payments a great deal compared to other countries. So what I can observe from a backhand position, if you will, yeah, very true. Within the banking industry, we're now experiencing what I wouldn't call the golden age, of course, as banks, they've innovated for a number of years, they've been engine of innovation, they've supported countries to growth. Up until 2000, 2005, they've occupied people, lots of employment, lots of people, lots of money circulating, and IT development, IT implementation. But what can I tell you now as a viewer as well, as a very interested viewer? Well, I can tell you that we're not observing a moment for concentration amongst banks, but also we're reorganizing skills as well. So considering scenario I'm knowledgeable of, which is a CIA, well, CIA is definitely champion of innovation Italy-wide. No doubt about it, and potentially also on a European level as well. We start have a saying now. So true that banks are now becoming the evil. But first of all, as a banker, proud of being a banker, this is not very true. This shouldn't be the case. We're not evil. But as an observer, and I'm sure PSD2 will allow that, so when you're creating this discontinuity, when there is competition again, and Jiffy is an example. It's a very good example because banks are getting equipped to launch it more successfully in a more cooperative way, in a more coordinated way as well. This is a very crucial element, as when banks are moving all together, then you can generate critical mass. Payment system nowadays can be successful or not successful according to the daily experience of the consumer, and that can also be ensured if you're able to generate large volumes, because that allows economies of scale, therefore reducing costs, and that will most likely happen within instant payment. Potentially costs will be cut down to zero. At some point we're shrinking margins every single day, and the large providers, they used to report double-digit growth and double-digit margins, where this is no longer the case nowadays, so margins now being shrunk down. So only if we generate large volumes, only if we can operate within the international scenario. And I look at Intesa because I really trust what they do. They've also a founding partner of CIA, by the way, a company I work for. So we shall all for banking systems still be there and still delivering innovation in the future, as well as competition by welcoming new input and react and compete. And I hope that Jiffy will prove to be a successful example. Joy.
Di sentire non dico un'accusa, ma l'osservazione che
Joy, so the observation that Maiocchi just made probably may sound as comments made by telco operators in the historical moment when telco were being considered evil. Maybe this is still the case today, when faced with new operators coming on the market and delivering chaos, actually. Well, I wish they were delivering chaos in a way. Well, I was taking notes of a couple of things. First of all, I was very much surprised by competition, this word that I've just heard. Well, hopefully they will go for competition. And I'm happy that they mention it. Just the mention of it makes me happy. That is a word that we've adopted and made our own within the telco industry. So competition is something that we're definitely happy about. So if we all agree together, we can actually change the world. Of course, we compete, but while we compete, we change the world. And this was actually the case. If I think about the past, then the world has changed in front of us very rapidly. So
creare invece delle barriere protezionistiche
So it has been fairly difficult to keep a good balance amongst competition and avoiding barriers. So there are some worries out there, some concerns. On one side, it looks like Europe is trying to just aim for the market, for new things in the market. Well, that does not apply everywhere, actually, because if we're looking at what is happening, it's not happening within the copyright. So there's still barriers out there which sound ridiculous. So if they were able to behave and act similarly as they've done in telco, then perhaps we would be able to overcome a number of barriers there. Or maybe next year we'll talk through copyright, okay, if you're interested.
C'è un po' un approccio iconoclasta in qualche modo che è quasi religioso.
So it's some sort of a kind of a religious approach nowadays. So no more barriers, free in the market. Well, the rule is smart ones will do it, not smart ones will fail. Well, I don't quite agree on that because within the world of ICT, it hasn't been the case. And one observation I'd love to share with you, because you just asked me.
Io ho alcuni santoni di riferimento, uno è Ivans.
I have some guru that I really am inspired by. Era from Boston Consulting Group. He would speak through transaction costs and zeroing them out. Well, that means something that would just change society completely. You know where you're starting from, you don't know where you're getting at. It would just change completely relationships amongst network companies, which are vertically integrated, so you don't really realize that until the moment you get there, and that is important.
Il fatto di voler abbattere tutte le barriere, da un lato,
well, we want to get rid of barriers. Well, on one side, it gives room to innovation. This is what we're talking about. But let's bear in mind that it's this complicated world, complex world, we have created, we've designed ourselves as ICT operators and network operators.
Io sul mio appunto ho segnato animali alieni. Tu li hai chiamati, come hai detto?
There are still some alien animals, the way you called them, the over-the-top. Well, in my view, they are alien, literally, alien operators, because at the same time they are large corporations. I've been to EGF in Bologna last week, and I said 5 years ago the top 5 companies for capitalizations were traditional companies. Apple was there, Microsoft used to be there. Well, last year, top five for cap were ICT companies, and they're alien. I believe them to be alien because they are large and they've got huge power, because they've got between 1 to 2 billion customers, products, either one or the other. So very, very powerful as a network. And then on the other side, they are very agile and flexible in their thinking, they're able to adapt and adjust to new businesses. That is something that cannot be found in traditional industries, such as banking industry. So those are operators that in a free market, transaction costs down to zero, well, they can actually make disasters.
Valentino Bravi
Valentino Bravi will now tell us what over-the-tops can do, because you mentioned them earlier on. And then I've got a second question on the Internet of Things later, because that might also give us the opportunity to speak through Industry 4.0, because that refers to the topic as well. So over-the-tops, is that a risk out there for these players to create solutions for payment as well? Not just so much to make payments, but also but more to collect data. I'm asking question because Google has tried to do it, but they haven't been so successfully to date. Well, they've done it. They create some database in Europe, well, but it hasn't been successful today that much. Well, it is. Okay, just let me know what is your view. Well, it's a big wave, which is now becoming more and more visible in the European market. And for sure, there'd be a very big player in the world of payment. Amazon is doing something which is quite big as well, and they're now accepting cash payment. Not very much reinventing the wheel, just by making use of systems that have been there for ages. But literally, you can pay the weather the way you want on Amazon too. So they can be dangerous, true, in inverted commas. Now, I don't know how much they can pay to schemes by using platforms for credit cards, but even if it is a 1 to 2%, we're talking about huge amount of money. Through PSD2, so tomorrow I'm expecting that something is changing. Yes, definitely. Two more items I wanted to touch. I wouldn't use Intesa as benchmark, because at that point we should only consider 2-3 banks along with Intesa. They have a dedicated platform. They have a very nice ability to look at the world. And yes, the others will make it. Well, the others, yes, they have a problem unless they network all together, and that is it's an Italy thing. Well, unless they network all together, the risk out there is very big. Telco. Well, I come from telco. I was in telco for 20 years. And true, we changed a great deal, but barriers are still out there. Think about the network. That is still a problem that we need to fix. There are still open issues. Banks are now addressing a very similar direction as the telco from last year, from past few years, but that is what the market is telling us to do. In terms of IoT, well, yes, fairly new. Well, not so new. It's been out there for many years. But how about relationship between IoT and payment? I can't really foresee. I can't really predict. Well, let me just make a very, very basic example. Refrigerator ordering, submitting the order for fresh milk and paying for it. Well, I find it easier to get to parking lot, and I forgot that is a payment parking, and the car will pay for me, and then I realize that I pay a lot of money, but I can't blame it on the car. Or maybe coming out with new insurance pay per use. So according to number of hours I'm using the car, I'm driving the car, on a monthly basis, I'm automatically paying for it, for my insurance, because actually my car is authorized through a prepaid system, and by means of pre-authorized channels, they can make the payment. So sky's the limit, really, and I'm expecting a lot in terms of innovation in the next 3, 4 to 5 years. D'Amico. I have a question around data. As payment is a very good way to collect data and to find out what is my behavior, what is my just general profile, what are my habits as a consumer. And if I'm very good in collecting data, I can process that data.
Pensabile che il pagamento, proprio perché il valore del pagamento, del lato del pagamento sarà sempre maggiore in termini di dati.
Value of payment will be increasingly important in terms of delivering data.
Non tanto per la concorrenza, ma proprio per quel motivo lì.
La domanda è corretta, io però come ho accennato prima sono molto allergico.
So what is your view around data collection here and around the cost down to zero? Well, and this is what over-the-tops are doing, so that is going to be a service which will be free of charge. Well, that will completely spoil business models. WhatsApp, chat is zero cost, SMS, text messages are no longer there. Perhaps in the long run, we don't know what's going to happen. We do have history to say what happened to airlines, to telco, so not necessarily competition and zero pricing in the long run will likely to be successful. Well, of course, competition makes sense, and instant payment and Jiffy examples, generally speaking, well, Jiffy is an Italian excellence by definition, and let me just tell you something. When they were identifying SIA, because they were launching a tender to understand who should be entrusted the management of payment, should be allocated that payment. Number of bids were made, and it looked like CIA was way better, and they were wondering how is it possible that they're doing things so well. Somebody said we have Ferrari in Italy, and he used to win in the past. So you shouldn't really be surprised that Italians are always, let's say, they're always, let's say, coming up with good ideas, but perhaps they're unable to make it successful in the long run.
Problemi, non me ne ricordo, giustamente, lui diceva meno se ne parla meglio è, perché vuol dire tutto funziona, è assolutamente corretto, quindi questo per dire che primo,
so what I'm saying is that competition is very good. Instant payment and Jiffy on the other side can be a good answer to proprietary system from traditional banks, and Satispay for what we believe they have a completely different approach. PayPal, they've been very smart thanks to agreement they developed with other companies. They've been able to introduce a system that can be standalone, independent in certain manner. PayPal would be instant payment, and if you were dropping PayPal, then you would go to traditional banks. Whereas Satispay, it can be considered as a proprietary system because it is so small that I cannot compare it to PayPal. It is actually leveraging traditional systems. So, for banking, for banks, I think they are far more scared and afraid of over-the-top because of the disruptive approach that they may have. And months ago, we spoke at the government, and we will have some more official meetings soon. They've been established officially by regulators. So we clearly said that we would like a mutual approach. So what I mean is that for PSD2, we've opened account to third authorized parties. For mutual approach to be there, we should actually be able to access profiles that they have been processed by algorithms, through algorithms by big players. Very similar to bank accounts. Bank account was not just being established as such. It's been processed by our systems. Perhaps we will be able to do that in 5-6 years' time. It is not an easy concept to appreciate and perceive.
Ed è assolutamente vero, il fatto che la massa critica sia
critical mass is important for us to reduce transaction costs. True. The more it is greater, the more there is concentration, also likelihood for monopoly. So it is very difficult to find the best balance, the right balance between open world competition and an equal world. The less competition, the greater created the risk for monopoly and for greater margins. So it is fairly complicated here. So what I'm hoping for is that authorities and regulators will adopt countermeasures to avoid dumping. As, of course, we shall price everything, and as efficient as you might be, there are still services that you need to pay for.
Andreani,
questo chiamiamolo rischio.
Talking about this risk, let's call it that way, that there are players which are particularly strong and interested not to payment but to the data behind the payment. What's your position?
Ma ho delle difficoltà a immedesimarmi
It is difficult for me
nel ruolo. Prima
to put my shoes, you know, in that role. Francesco said a moment ago that the others have always been in the banking world. But then there's a limit, because in our past, in point of fact, since 2003, and up until 2010, OpenTech world in the telco world, and its main partner was Facebook. Facebook US. So, I think that, you know, your history can have an impact, inevitably so, on your points of view. I think that for sure, you know, risk is important, as we said earlier on. If there's a market that, for a reason, has its own margins, I mean, if we talk about the payments market, recently, an interchange fee rule has been put in place, which has reduced the margins on credit cards on the issuer side. But again, it's always been a market with high margins. If it is opened up, well, it becomes attractive for other players. And these players, by the way, can establish synergies in respect of other services. I think that, or better, the speaker corrects himself, I don't think that in terms of regulation you can curb this trend, in contrast with what Sabino said. I believe instead that innovation goes on, and the competitive push that drives innovation can be the only defense from the opening up of the market. And so those who will be more convincing vis-à-vis the final user will win. And today, data comes from banks. Banks have loyal customers and they have lots of data, so they will have to innovate in maintaining this relationship. Probably for some banks which are not structured to innovate in terms of processes and technology, I mean, to innovate their products, probably one key, and well, on this, quite obviously, I'm talking in the best interests of my group, well, in that case, the best thing to do is go to the fintechs. Well, that's interesting.
Visto che sia Andreani, ma
both Andreani and Bravi said that you have a past in the world of TLCs or telcos. So I want to know from you if there still is an issue of reliability of the networks and payments. Let's start with Andreani. I mean, when I make a payment of course, the entities that have to connect for the success of the payment are, numerous, and I believe that there is a close connection in terms of reliability of the networks at play. Yes, indeed. I mean, your question is interesting in many regards, because there are several solutions and answers that this system can provide. For example, if there is enough storage and computing power, and I'm saying so because we have several experts here, maybe each can store a copy of the transaction, and since we have lots of room, we can do that. And another possibility, thanks to our processing capacity, is to use asymmetric key algorithms so as to be sure that the piece of information will not be rejected and will be kept confidential. And this leads us to the famed blockchain. In a nutshell, it's this. We have space, we store the complete register of transactions, and, well, essentially, we sign to confirm. In my mind, this is an extreme case. I mean, from completely closed-ended networks, which are typical of the banking systems, I mean the legacy ones, but not so old ones, and also of some current ones, to currently manage payment processes, through to blockchain, according to me, and this is only my personal opinion, there are many solutions in between which are very effective and open, but more efficient maybe today compared to blockchain. And this is just to tell you that the innovations that come from the internet several years ago have not yet been taken up by the banking and payments industries, and we are still in a stage where we, for example, have to convince banks that with a two-node connection, with authentication, exchange of certificates, and traveling through the internet, we can have a level of security which is not lower than that of a direct two-node connection. Will you clap hands? Please do. Bravi would like to add something on the front of networks. Well, we deal with interbanking networks. 90% of the transactions are done this way. They are proprietary, very reliable, very good networks. CI is one of the most important ones, and SWIFT is the most well-known worldwide, probably. And then, well, SWIFT has had some problems, yes, sure. Which? D'Amico says no. Anyway, well, $1 trillion transactions, are dealt with every day, and then we have T2, T2S payments, which are made by the central banks. The Bank of Italy and Bundesbank, it's our piece of software, and each and every day we do this with billions of transactions per day. So it's a super tested, super reliable system. And there's a protocol. EBIX has been there for some years. It comes from the central bank. There's a bank-to-bank communication, no problem. It's predefined. It is absolutely secured. Not all of the banks use it. And as part of communications, there are startups that started operating some years ago, so they're no longer startups. They don't have billions of banks connected, but simple, for example, to make a precise example, uses the blockchain technology to do what SWIFT does with the point-to-point connection between two banks when it comes to settling the various transfers. So there's a lot of technology in the sector. Maybe it's not so well known, it's very vertical, and most especially, I'm proud to say that Italy plays a very important role in this, both in Europe and elsewhere. And Europe plays a very important role worldwide. And the US, which are always our main benchmark for finance and economy, well, they're lagging behind in terms of payment. Very many payments in the US is carried out through checks when it comes to B2B and B2C payments. And cards in the US, I mean, 75–80% of cards don't have a chip or don't use it because the acquiring scheme doesn't use it. So the fraud percentage is very high compared to Europe. So once in a while, we're very good, and payments are a case in point in Italy and Europe. D'Amico, would you like to add something on SWIFT? No, aside from the fact that SWIFT was established in 1970, and so far as I know, no fraud has ever impacted SWIFT. Some time ago, news talked about a fraud for the Central Bank of Bangladesh, but the problem is not with SWIFT, but the process was not well done. They exchanged data through PDF files, and someone, stepped in between sender and receiver, but SWIFT has nothing to do with that. SWIFT, thanks God, is ultra secure up until now. You can never say, but I mean, blockchain, since you deal with this in the Innovation Center of Intesa Sanpaolo. Yes, I also deal with this, not just with this. How can we use, if it is worthwhile to use it, because Andreani talked about the inefficiency of blockchain, so that's an issue. Yes, we should, first of all, and I'm simplifying quite obviously because I don't want to be too difficult, but we have to make a difference between Bitcoin and private blockchains. The, public part is extraordinary in terms of technology and security because they've created a system which, alas, makes it possible to transfer digital assets, including money, i.e. Bitcoin, on a peer-to-peer basis, i.e. without needing an intermediary. And so, natively, this would disintermediate banks, and not only banks, as to that. If we apply the notion of what underlies this, we could do without lots of things, including notaries and car registries. But the main difference between a system like EBA clearing, which is typically centralized with someone at the center recording payments, flows and exchanges, and passes the data to central banks that charge the accounts, and then the messages are distributed and the payments are made. And so let's say that the trusted third parties are the central ones, EBA in the central banks. And the disruption of blockchain comes from the fact that in this case, the truth doesn't come from the central banks, but it's because there are millions of nodes, every node has its own history, and so it self-certifies that something happened. And if it is capable not to, to be changed, and it's never been changed since 2009, we don't need a certification because blockchain itself is history. So technology-wise, it's a huge benefit. But why cannot we use blockchain, on a massive scale? Well, because it has three main problems. One is scalability. Today, we talk about 5 transactions per second with Bitcoin because the size of the block doesn't change against hundreds of thousands or millions, and Sia will tell us how many per second, but I mean, this is the order of magnitude, and the orders of magnitude are different. This is one point. And then the issue of privacy and traceability. When I make a payment to you, the addresses are public. They're visible by anyone. The amount is public, and unless you hide it, sooner or later you can trace back to the sender and receiver. And this leads me to talk about the third main problem, i.e. the fact that we cannot trace the transaction, because there's someone who, on purpose, hides, these flows, so we cannot understand if, the transaction went from D'Amico to Pagliarin. So, as a result of these 3 reasons, right now, even though blockchain is efficient and works, cannot be used on a massive scale. But this doesn't mean that the blockchain technology is inefficient across the board, if you allow me to use this expression. Because, I mean, now we've talked about banking and insurance, but I mean, consortia have been created, including, if I'm not wrong, R3, that has become a company for all intents and purposes, and they use part of the Bitcoin technology. I mean, it's a blockchain, but it doesn't use certain things. The proof of work is one of these things which make it inefficient. So this is to tell you that we still have to prove this with facts, meaning that we have to prove that we can use a private blockchain massively, but we are doing that with R3, but we believe that it is a method to strongly innovate many interbank areas, all of those where it is very important to put together lots of pieces of information. Payments are a cousin point, but also trade services, as well as capital markets and securities transactions, and so on and so forth. And we believe that in many areas this can be a huge benefit. The question is, when do you think you will start production? Well, I think that we could have, I mean, we've had several prototypes. I'm very happy. I told my colleagues a moment ago, Intesa Sanpaolo has been picked from, 7 European banks to talk to the Commission and the Central European Bank to talk about our experiences, which have been considered to be very interesting. But, this is to tell you that fintech and blockchain are being monitored closely by the regulators. Then the European Central Bank, for example, has carried out a pilot project with the Central Japanese Bank with the digital ledger technology as part of the systems to settle and clear, which, the reason why banks have to clear is because they have to make cash efficient, because instead of giving to each a number of payments, you clear the difference. Okay, that's clear. I wanted to mention the Industry 4.0 trend, and then you can call it what you want. Maiocchi. If we transfer all that we've talked about to the companies, because now we've talked about payments, assuming that we are talking about consumer payments. I mean, for example, when we surf the net and make a purchase of a service or good. But if we think instead of what goes on between companies and inside companies, what's going on in terms of digitalization and what could happen with Industry 4.0, where they use IoT, connected cars, and cars that talk to each other?
Allora, in effetti, quando noi parliamo di digitalizzazione dei pagamenti,
so when we speak about digitalizing payments, we refer to paying daily items, something that you can buy through your mobile. And hopefully, just by means of looking at your phone, you're able to make that small payment. But when it comes to more, let's say, larger amounts, those payments are being made by companies, so the B2B fashion. On B2B, I shall admit that Italian companies have been an excellence from a Treasury viewpoint, Treasury Department viewpoint, both in Italy and Europe-wide. So when it comes to cash pooling, cash collection, and maximization of the Treasury Department, so avoiding losing days of value, of money value. Well, Italian companies have always led the way. If you speak to leaders from Fiat, well, you always learn about something. Although we've been there with payments for many years now, you end up learning something when speaking to these people, to these leaders from Treasury Department. So what are we doing now to shift to Industry 4.0? Well, we want to speed up payments. That's fairly easy to say. Companies are now thinking of adopting instant payment to pay their compensation salaries. How to shift to 4.0? Well, instant payments can actually help you in solving natively issues and such as making instant payment for perishable goods products. And nowadays, there are still checks being used, even to pay petrol at the gas station. Makes you smile, of course, but is it still the case? It may actually lead to all sorts of issues you can think about. So no cash is collected in the end. Through instant payment, you can manage and fix that from scratch. Also, when you're actually collecting money, there is some data traveling along with it. That doesn't happen with a wire transfer. Through instant payment, we could fix that problem as well. So it is very likely that instant payment will become increasingly important in banking transactions. Well, we're lagging behind on some other stuff, that's very true, but on other aspects, we're actually speeding up things very much. Blockchain is supporting us a great deal, for instance. When a large bill has to bill utilities to large companies, and this is a problem that we're currently faced with, well, there's a problem in reconciling and making reconciliation of money exchange and so on. So B2B, as of today, is what
sta creando qui degli use case che magari si
is what is now creating use case, which most likely will deliver innovation in our daily payments. Let me make another example. Instant payment can allow instant cash pooling. Cash pooling nowadays is not instant and not real time. It'd be impossible for a Treasury Department to do that in a real time for a telco company. So making, let's say, being able to make transactions amongst bank accounts. Whereas instant payment in 2018, very likely that is going to be happening in real time. So it is a very dynamic moment of time, and Industry 4.0 will go through an enhanced interaction with customers, that's for sure. But unless we're able to streamline processes which are underlined, which are behind the scene, which are making actually reconciliation, for instance, to happen between the payment and SAP, we couldn't be speaking about 4.0 at all, whereas actually we're observing a greater and increasingly faster development. That's a very interesting trend. And I don't know whether you're testing actually anything of that. As Bravi said earlier on, is anybody testing possibilities for machines, for instance? For instance, petrol to be delivered to a gas station and that automatically triggers payment, instant payment. Well, we'll perhaps get there actually. And as opposed to paying through chat, just a fingerprint on your tablet, that will help, of course. I don't know whether you have any industrial case scenarios that you can mention. Something that I would like to mention, because I've been truly fascinated by it, although I'm not expert, is the supply chain finance. Companies are increasingly more digital, and banks are capable of interacting, interfacing between another and understanding what's happening within companies. That actually makes it easier to provide the supply chain finance. And yes, that is the added value services which some banks are already granting and automate as well, because they have a better knowledge of the customer. So of course they'll be able to be proactive and grant loans with less risks and easier as well. Let's bear in mind that most of banks are actually still paying for mistakes they made in the past. Practical examples you asked me for? Currently we're working with 2 international car makers, and we're making prototypes with them, trying to test, trying to see whether cars can automatically pay for toll, for parking lots, and toll costs outside Italy, so outside our country. And Telepass is actually, which is a brand in Italy, is making huge steps. And car services, and when the car is being serviced, so all those fees, and we're trying to speed up all of that, because this is becoming increasingly important in our processes. Joy.
Approfitto anche per dire che noi probabilmente abbiamo un microfono che possiamo far girare per la sala.
Also, I would like to tell the audience to raise a question if they have any. There will be a microphone passing around for you to submit a question, if any. Okay. So while we're getting organized for questions, I have a few things to say. As a protectionist, because I would like to say that I'm favorable for ITT.
Ed è che il modello free, il modello alla Google,
the Google model,
i ricavi sono basati sul fatto che ti rubo le informazioni.
Revenues are actually coming from a successful robbery of information that is not going to be sustainable. Also thinking about sharing that data, Facebook, Google, Amazon. Well, Amazon is a different story. I'll get there. So if Google were able to squeeze 20 euros per year from each and every Google user, well, perhaps it would be more profitable. It would make more revenues compared to what they're doing through advertisement. And why Amazon? Well, Amazon already got there. They're trying to squeeze the 20 euros for virtual services that they deliver from any Amazon Prime subscriber. User. So what's the weak side of it? What's the drawback? D'Amico spoke about dumping earlier. Well, somehow, if we consider the Google model, there is an absence, there's a lacking piece that has been filled in.
Di euro per fare un'operazione. Se io faccio un'interrogazione e voglio avere una bella risposta.
Let's say that I'm asking a question to Google, I'm raising a problem and I want to receive an answer. I'm even happy to pay even a cent, but there was no way for me to make such a small payment. So if we're actually reducing transaction costs and if we're able to deliver small payments online, then we are getting rid of the free system, and we can speak to the user and tell him, okay, dear user, would you rather pay 1 cent and keep your data private, or are you happy to share and disseminate your profile as long as you're having free services? And then it's up to the user to make the choice.
Prego, ce l'abbiamo un microfono? Sì, sì, qua davanti. Seconda fila, anche perché la prima è vuota. Prego.
Sì, grazie. Rosario Bingaro di Convergenze.
Bingaro from Convergenze. I would like to take advantage of this location and this roundtable
anche un'altra mia funzione, quella di
to speak about my role. So what does it mean to lead a small bank from Credito Cooperativo? And I would like to deliver a positive message as well, because not necessarily in your speeches, in your exchange, there has been a positive attitude towards less significant banks. I've been being so mean. You've been a little mean, yes. But let's say that it's been 3 years now that we've been fighting against 3 main issues: interest margin equal to 0, regulations, regulation burden, and most important one, digital technology, well, the innovation in a nutshell. Small banks for years, they've been knowledgeable about challenges out there. Yeah, we're a good number actually of small banks. And this room is full of people, and it's not just fast. That also means that it's not just the big telcos, and this is not just the big banks out there. Don't think we're going to be more than 15, 16 in the future. Well, I was exaggerating. I was just saying that perhaps 600 are too many. Well, there's going to be self-regulation, perhaps, leading to 2 large groups, ICREA and Cassa Centrale. And my question is relative to I would like to speak to Director Corporate Department of CIA. So, according to you, in your view, do you expect these 2 large banking groups to have the financial resources to compete in this important industry that has to do with technology innovation? Well, I'm just director, I'm not managing director of CIA, but I've worked in Credito Cooperativo in the past, so I'm quite knowledgeable about it. Did you know about it? Did you know where you were addressing this Mr. Maiocchi? No, I didn't know. Well, I can tell you that those 2 groups that Credito Cooperativo is focusing upon are very solid and stable and sound. I know them very well.
E qui ritorniamo alla parola magica che abbiamo usato poco tempo fa.
And let me just go back to that magic word we said before, we spoke about before, competition. Credito Cooperativo lives upon competition. Once they make investment, then they leave room to all the local stakeholders, local players, the opportunity to interact and interface with customers and acquire some new ones. Innovation nowadays gets along hand in hand with lots of financial resources that need to be invested. There's no finalized journey, first of all, in terms of digital payments. So there are 4 or 5 ongoing initiatives, and over the last decade, there has been 1 per each year. None of them have actually been implemented successfully if we consider investment made. We spoke about and we invested on mobile payment, and we gathered way less than what we were expecting. With the colleague from Intesa, we undertook a number of initiatives, lots of initiatives, from Bollettino Freccia to Jiffy, just to mention a few, to a couple of examples. But what I'm saying is that unless we're able to cooperate, coordinate, and work for competition within investment, we don't even know what is the best investment now, and then we'll be a loser unless we're able to change that. So initiatives such as Credito Cooperativo cooperativos. Of course, I'm more than welcome, and they look very attractive to all the stakeholders as they stand as the one hope for small banks to still survive on the market. So my answer is yes, as long as we're able to keep that trend, that orientation for small banks to still survive on the market, and not just for small banks actually, because there's also a strong need to be able to prioritize effectively, and also there's very little money to invest nowadays, both in small as well as in large companies. But when considering over the tops, of course, they will end up being on the market soon, so they were not pioneers. But if you consider Apple Pay advertisement, just to share with you something very daily, and to raise some curiosity out there in the audience. You must have seen newspapers, advertisement from payment systems, then Apple Pay, 3 seconds in a very relaxing way. They have defined a new standard on how mobile payment can be executed and become successful. And it's not by chance that now all systems are now strongly oriented onto that direction, because they actually set the trend, they set a new standard. So in terms of user experience as well. Back to your question, the answer is yes. So try to be positive, but the banking system is trying to reorganize to be more and more sound and solid. I don't know whether I've been able to answer your question effectively. Yes, I agree that coordination and competition are going to be crucial. Actually, the ability to invest a great deal of money is as important, and I'm pretty convinced and pretty positive that if a company is unable to invest effectively, won't survive for long. We as journalists, we do write a lot of nonsense, but recently I actually came across an article that was having doubt about startup innovating effectively in an increasingly complicated world, sometimes requesting for high investment in artificial intelligence, which can be really managed by small startups. Only large corporations will be able to do that. And perhaps payments are applicable the same way, so they can't really be managed and handled by small companies, small banks. Any more questions from the audience or concerns? How about biometrics? D'Amico, we haven't mentioned it. And it is another hot topic which sounds as interesting, along with payment. Oh, yes, they actually get along hand in hand actually, because they make usability for payment methods easier. Easy example, which is even obsolete, is the fingerprint. Many applications, also in Intesa San Paolo, allow a user to authenticate himself through fingerprint. Nowadays, we're already considering something more sophisticated by behavioral biometry. The latter allows to acquire from mobile and non-mobile devices, to acquire up to 400-500 biometric data, which range from pressure I'm exercising when I'm clicking on the screen, or the way I'm positioning my fingers, size of my fingers, all of that. All of the above, of course, if customer has provided consent to it, so we just take it for granted all the regulatory piece as well as the approval. So once that has been abided by, then a customer can actually refer to his own app in a very normal way on his mobile. When accessing the app for 5-6 times, 1.5 minutes, there's an authentication profile which is being created, which includes those that I mentioned and others, and the scoring is being provided. Scoring may range between 0 and 1,000. When user is back to the app, then it's been applied. So the same algorithm is being applied to understand what scoring has been hit, and then the bank, it can be a bank, but it can be a provider. At that point, the company using, so needing authentication, it can very well understand whether authentication makes sense. In a matter of few seconds, if that is not you accessing that app, you're being, well, the user is being, is immediately being discovered. Intesa San Paolo can trigger a number of alarms and can perhaps submit text messages to a different device so to raise the issues, so a potential discrepancy or up to a complete block. So the user being blocked completely. I think all these tools are exponentially increasing the success of biometrics. And what is very positive for me out there is that we are our own password. We don't need to keep anything in mind. We just need to behave same way as we usually do. When is this going to be enforced? I can't tell you a date. It's going to be a week time, year time? Well, a number of months, actually. It's fairly complicated. Who developed that technology? I'm curious about it. Well, many different startups are now working on it, coming from Israeli, military, for military purposes, actually. But not only that. We are currently partnering with a company in Tel Aviv. And as you know, they've developed an excellent ecosystem on cybersecurity, biometrics, even AI and digital payments as well. So we do work with this company. It's not the one hub we're partnering with. They're more. We actually speak to them fairly often. Are there any more questions from the audience? We'll get the mic over there in a moment.
Joy, tutti I vostri clienti vi pagano senza problemi? Non è che era un messaggio ai clienti questo.
So are your customers paying you?
Prego.
Very well, so your problem with payment, no problem. Paesani, good afternoon. This is a very infrequent opportunity, so I'd like to take this opportunity. I was afraid of asking a question, but now's come the time. So how distant are you? How far are we of having a chip under skin? Because that would really mean to close the loop, right? The chip is the only piece missing. So I was wondering whether is there somebody investigating on that? Is there any psychological feedback on that? Is there a psychological department currently taking care of that and that potential interaction? So when man is finishing and the machine is starting, there's a blurred border between the two, and that of course is crucial for IoT to be fully implemented because we've got many different examples around that already. Thank you. So I want to answer these questions around the chip.
Comincio a rispondere, poi chi vuole ovviamente
Okay, I can provide my own view. Well, there's one Swedish experience that has been happening so far. Some employees are actually using it. Well, not for paying, not to pay. Well, I can just use it for whatever purpose, for whatever objective. We're not currently investigating into it as yet. To be honest, there are also some individuals who have actually implanted some special limbs, some acoustic waves detector being implanted. So as I said, we're not studying into it. It sounds as very invasive. Also, this is not, well, chip is under the skin, this is not under the skin, but mobile is always on us. It's far less invasive, and of course there are some negatives, but the way things are, I would say that the smartphone is the one tool we never want to forget about, as it used to be the wallet, 4 years ago.
Quando perdi il portafoglio te ne puoi accorgere.
When you lose your wallet, you can actually realize a day later, whereas when you lose your phone, you realize 5-6 minutes later. So that is the difference. Oh yes, I remember there has been a judge, a magistrate in the US, who wrote in a verdict if Martian would land on planet Earth, would believe that actually smartphone is a limb of us.
Dunque,
una battuta su questo.
No, dovete fare ancora un paio di domande.
So, a couple more questions. We have to hit 7, so we have to close 7 sharp.
3 ore, però è più bello se fanno domande.
No, sentivo prima dire che l'IBAN è un problema perché non è portabile.
I've heard IBAN is a problem because it's not portable, but think about phone number. And think about chip. Chip is not portable either, because when you change it, telco operator, you changing the chip as well. You don't want to change that chip every time you speak to different operator. Is there an ASIM, perhaps expert here, who can tell us what's going to happen? Because the ISIM, actually, you should be able to change very rapidly, easily. Very good over there. Yes, we'll get you the mic up there in a moment. So
sarebbe la soluzione ideale per fare la giraffa.
C'è qualcuno che fa droni.
Ah, è vero, loro fanno droni.
There's some drone manufacturers here. Guido Maire.
Una domanda relativamente
a questions relative to biometrics.
Questa, diciamo, facilitazione che addirittura fa diventare l'utilizzo dello smartphone, la password stessa.
It looks like biometrics can be the password, but then we become less and less aware of what is happening when we make an operation. If I'm supposed to, to key in PIN or press for fingerprint, I realize that I'm making the transaction and I'm having the transaction approved. Whereas if it is an ongoing authentication, perhaps I'm performing transactions, I'm executing transactions that I don't want to. Does it make sense? Well, very right question. And in fact, these systems can be used in many different modes. They can be used for anti-fraud purposes. I can just, for instance, I can just use them to warn officers, security officers, or maybe just trigger a number of processes which are ensuring authentication of the user. According to PSD2, these tools won't be actually used for authentication purposes. So what we want to do is to really understand how to set them up properly, because what you say it absolutely makes sense. And by the way, PSD2 will require for strong authentication, so when it comes to 30, 50 euros, so above 30, 50 euros transactions. So perhaps it can be a choice of a user to just execute below 50 euros, and that is currently being tested in a pilot, and we're fine-tuning according to feedbacks, and at that point we can avoid the additional PIN code, because if I'm doing a top-up for my son and my wife and I just have to key in PIN code, well, it's not a big deal if it's a 30 euros amount. Whereas somebody is making a wire transfer to Ukraine, 10,000 euros, never been done before, maybe at that point it makes more sense to ask for an additional password or something. Very good. Now I have a question for Ricci.
Pagamento e droni.
Around payments and drones. What is about it? Because you actually manufacture drones, right?
No, è un'altra startup innovativa. Abbiamo pensato a un sistema di riscontro, di controllo.
It is an innovative startup.
In poche parole, quando un drone si alza in volo, c'è una
so when a drone is flying, there's a platform checking and data is being exchanged.
So sicuramente quando si parla di low full intercept, qualcuno penso che qui dentro sappia di che cosa stiamo parlando. abbiamo pensato di utilizzare la rete telefonica.
So we have considered to use the telephone network as a certifying body. What I mean is that the flying drone speaking to the platform, it's been certified by the telephone network through systems or LBS technologies. In this case, drones communicating is located in Corso Buenos Aires and actually instead is in the Cathedral Square. Then at that point, we verify, we tell the platform, actually the drone saying to you is in Corso Buenos Aires, is actually on Cathedral, then there's a trigger of a number of services. Drone has embedded SIMs card which can be used to make payments for logistics. I want to deliver on behalf of Bartolini a small package, and they have to pay for it. So the parcel's been delivered, and then through RFID or QR code technologies, there's an exchange of information, CRO code is being issued, and the payment occurs. So, Ricci actually is starting a number of initiatives and is incorporating fantastic, amazing startups, companies. Speaking to everyone, to banks, to telcos, to many different industries, all at the same time. So they can be companion of many different industries, of old incumbent.
Bene. Allora, a questo punto, non so se voi avete delle...
I don't know if you have comments or questions. No, you don't. So, Joy, well, are we going to have an aperitif? Yes, we're going to have an aperitif. And again, it's going to be a moment of social networking, like at the beginning of this afternoon. And thus, for those of you who can stay, we have dinner offered by Mix and sponsors. Yes, the sponsors have offered this day, have collaborated to the success of this day. Okay. Let's meet again in 2018. What will be the title? Well, considering that this year we've decided very early and we've completed very late, I don't know what's going to happen next year. No way. Okay, so you're going to talk about a topic we've talked about several years ago, i.e. net neutrality. Most of the issues in Europe have been solved, probably in Europe, but there won't be major problems. But in the US, unfortunately, something will change. Well, tomorrow we'll come up with ideas. There are two ideas. One is this, and you know, net neutrality is a hot topic and will continue to be hot. The fact that we are not going to talk about that in Italy, well, that's an issue as well. And the other one, well, Valeria, yesterday, talked to me about that. What about Milan? I'll bet 5 cents and cash. Well, it's something we shouldn't be talking about. But the brochure of Milan for the EMA project contains only once the word internet in non-capital letters to say that the Pirellone building has gas, water, running water, and the internet, i.e. the utilities. The Amsterdam brochure has 2 pages talking about four pages talking about connectivity. They talk about airports, they talk about ports, and there are 2 beautiful pages talking about AM6, saying that the internet is abundant, is strategic, and is used to connect. I mean, we didn't lose because of that, but let's think of it. Okay, well, it's a pity, it's too bad Milan didn't win, but it's good in a way, according to me, because Amsterdam is Amsterdam, but also because of this reason. I mean, we have not sufficiently emphasized and highlighted certain things that we do have, and that maybe, their value should be enhanced more. I don't know how many of you saw the presentation, and, in terms of graphics, we should punish the person who prepared that. We'll find out who's to blame, and we'll react. No violence, of course. Oh, having come thus far, it's 9 p.m. Enjoy the evening, and thank you for staying with us.